everyone. Welcome to our award-winning podcast created by George S. Corey and the artist Cleo. We're back for Season 3, and so are Georgie and Gigi, for more fun adventures.
I'm George.
I'm Cleo.
I'm Steven.
I'm Maya.
And I'm Tavia. Welcome to The Social Contract. We are off to such a great start. I cannot wait to dive right into Georgie and Gigi's continuing adventures in Kids Are Brave, Part 2. But first, I wanted to check in with our resident kid, Maya. Hi, Maya. You don't mind me calling you a kid, do you? Even though you are in 6th grade now. How about if I called you young lady?
That's fine with me.
I remember that 6th grade felt like such a big jump for me, much more so than 3rd to 4th or 4th to 5th grade. Has that been your experience so far?
Yes, 6th grade is very different.
Like the stars of our story, I know you really like history, and I do too. Tell us about the other subjects and activities you're liking so far this year.
I'm really loving literacy. We do Free Write Friday, so you write anything you want. I write happy feelings, places I like to be.
Okay, one last question. Are you into video games like Georgie and Gigi are?
I'm really into video games like Fortnite and Roblox.
Now, over to Steven for Part 2 of Kids Are Brave.
Georgie stretched out his hand and said, "Hello, Mr. Lincoln. President Lincoln. I'm Georgie, and this is my BFF Gigi." Lincoln raised an eyebrow. BFF? "Yeah," exclaimed Gigi. "Best friends forever. Can we call you Abe?" "I suppose so," he replied, confused. "But how did I come to be here?" "We brought you here, Abe. We were at the Super Mario Brothers Marathon at OLQP. "A super what?" "Super Mario Brothers. Like the game, Super Mario Odyssey?" Lincoln just stared at them, dumbfounded. "Anyway, Georgie loves history. I like it. And we've been learning all about you. We think you did a great job as president." Abe looked down at his hands, then felt his face and hair. He marveled, saying, "Oh, I am as I was as a young member of the Illinois State Legislature, when I was just beginning my political career. But what have I done to reach the gentle ears of you children, and merit in some way your admiration?" "Well, Abe, for starters, you made a speech about how really, really bad slavery is because it's a moral evil." "Ah, yes, the Lyceum address, given very early in my career when I was but a 28-year-old legislator. You know about that?" "Of course," Georgie said. "We learned about it from Sister Elaine in our government and citizenship class. And about how you became president and freed the slaves. But not before a civil war was fought, because half the country wanted slavery and the other half didn't." Gigi chimed in. "You allowed black soldiers to fight alongside white soldiers during war. Like Sister Elaine always says, it's all about teamwork." "Well, this Sister Elaine sounds like a very good teacher." "Oh, she is," nodded Georgie. "Let me see if I can teach you something Sister Elaine hasn't taught you," Lincoln said. "Have you learned about the Underground Railroad?" "You mean the subway train?" asked Gigi. "Well, no. It was not an actual railroad. There were no passenger trains chugging along beneath the earth. The Underground Railroad was the name given to a secret network of abolitionists that helped enslaved people escape to free states. As their name suggests, abolitionists wanted to abolish slavery. And we cannot speak of the Underground Railroad or of abolitionism itself without speaking of Harriet Tubman." Lincoln spun around and pointed to a portrait of Harriet Tubman. But it wasn't the famous image of a weary old woman. No, This painting depicted a young and vibrant Harriet. "Oh, I know her!" Gigi clapped her hands. "You do?" Georgie asked her. "Of course. It's Harriet. From Harriet, the movie. The one we watched on Netflix with your Grandma Marie. Cynthia Erivo played Harriet." Gigi turned to Lincoln. "I love Cynthia Erivo. She's the one who's playing Elphaba in the Wicked movie. Oh my gosh, I love Wicked." Honest Abe scratched his head. In truth, he had no idea what this child was talking about. Then G&G reached into the portrait of Harriet, and just as they had done with Abe, pulled her out of the painting. When she emerged, she looked down at Georgie and Gigi. "Who are these young'uns? And how did I come to this place?" Gigi explained to her. "Well, Miss Tubman, Honest Abe here was telling us all about the Underground Railroad, and he said we just had to meet you." Harriet dusted the long white apron tied around her waist, saying, "Don't you know I am busy? Why, just this moment I was leading 11 slaves from Maryland to freedom." Then her eyes met those of Abraham Lincoln. It was a special moment that this video game, with the help of Georgie and Gigi, had made magically possible, for these two towering figures had never actually met. "Oh my, we'll now have seen it all," Harriet remarked to herself. She held out a hand, saying, "It is an honor to meet you, sir." Lincoln clasped her hand and kissed it respectfully. "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Tubman." "Oh, call me Minty," she said. "My Mama Rit, that's short for Harriet, I took my mother's name, and my Papa Ben Ross first called me that. Now everyone who knows me does." She looked down at Georgie and Gigi and told them that they may call her Minty too. "I didn't go to the Lincoln White House when my friend Sojourner invited me along. Oh, that would be Sojourner Truth, an aptly named fellow abolitionist who fought for the rights of all people. You will no doubt learn about her, too. I didn't know, how could I, that Mr. Lincoln's life would be cut short and that I would never have a chance to meet him. Imagine that. But, sir," she continued, addressing Lincoln, "I came to know your widow, our First Lady, Mrs. Mary Todd Lincoln, and for that I am grateful." "As am I," Lincoln said quietly, turning to Georgie and Gigi. "Now, Miss Minty, why don't you tell these fine young people more about yourself?" Georgie and Gigi were captivated by Minty's story. She was born a slave to enslaved parents and escaped. Twice! When I found I had crossed that line, I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person, she told them. There was such a glory over everything. The sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields. I felt like I was in heaven. After her final successful escape to freedom, Minty was not happy to simply forget her past and lead a comfortable life as a free woman. She committed herself to helping others gain their freedom. I was the conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. Now, as I told you, when you pulled me into this world of yours by some voodoo spell, I was leading 11 people to freedom. Now I'm worried about them. G&G promised that they wouldn't keep her much longer. They just wanted to know a little more of her story. Minty went on to tell them that she had undertaken about 13 missions on the Underground Railroad and was responsible for ushering many enslaved people to freedom. She was called the Moses of her people, but said she didn't like that name because there was only one Moses. She was Minty, and she was perfectly happy being Minty. When the Civil War began, she became very valuable to the Union Army because of the skills she'd acquired on the Underground Railroad. She explained how she'd used the gifts God gave her to help the cause in any way she could. She served as a cook and a nurse, often administering herbal remedies to the soldiers she treated. She even worked as a wartime spy. You were an actual spy? Asked Georgie. Oh, yes, Minty said. I'd disguise myself as a field hand or hunch over and pretend I was a very old, decrepit woman. Then I'd wander around the areas that were under the slavers' control to learn as much as I could from the slaves themselves. And I'd report back with all the information I'd gathered about troop placements, supply lines, and such things. Minty told them how during the Civil War, way back in 1863, she'd been the first woman in U.S. history to lead a major military operation. Colonel James Montgomery had entrusted her to lead 150 black Union soldiers to rescue hundreds of slaves in the Combahee Ferry raid. The colonel was kind enough to later call me a most remarkable woman, but I'm just glad I was able to help all those people to freedom. You're really brave, Minty, said Gigi admiringly. Well, I suppose I am, Minty replied, but I just did what I felt like I had to do. I'd been given the gift of freedom, and I could not rest until I helped as many people as I could win their freedom as well. Was the Civil War exciting? Georgie asked. Bite your tongue, child, said Minty. War is a terrible thing. It must be avoided at all costs. Indeed, added Lincoln. I sincerely wish war was a pleasanter and easier business than it is. But alas, it is not. Freedom was calling, and there were 11 slaves who would be wanting theirs. The two G's said goodbye to Minty. They told her that they would never forget her story and always remember her bravery. Then they assisted her as she stepped back into the painting and vanished. I, too, must take leave of you, children, Lincoln said. Then, in an official-sounding voice, he proclaimed, Let every American, every lover of liberty, every well-wisher to his posterity, swear never to violate in the least the laws of the country, and never to tolerate their violation by others. That's from my Lyceum address. We politicians wash and press and reuse speeches as we do our garments. Georgie and Gigi laughed. They thanked Honest Abe and again expressed their admiration to him as he too vanished back into the painting. They looked around the virtual gallery. It was suddenly eerily still. The two G's slowly removed their VR headsets, and just like that, they were back in OLQP's gymnasium. The Super Mario Bros. Marathon was still going. Only a few minutes had passed, but Georgie and Gigi's combined score had already broken the record from last year's marathon. Their adventure had gained them points in their hearts and their minds and on the scoreboard. That was beyond exciting, exclaimed Gigi. I absolutely cannot wait to tell Sister Elaine all about it. Georgie just shook his head. She's never gonna believe this.
That was so good. How can anyone not be inspired by Harriet Tubman's bravery in the face of such darkness? Just remarkable. I have to admit that even as a bit of a history buff myself, I learned a few things from this episode. I didn't know about her nickname, Minty. That was pretty great, and definitely memorable. And I didn't realize that she had never met Lincoln. I love how it was through the power of George and Cleo's imaginations that they were finally brought together, even fictitiously. Georgie and Gigi seem so real to me, I sometimes forget that they're fictitious too. Now, some interesting trivia about Harriet Tubman, or should I call her Minty? There's been talk for years now about redesigning the $20 bill to feature Harriet. According to the Washington Post, the Biden administration promised to speed up the process of replacing Andrew Jackson with Harriet Tubman, but it hasn't happened yet. Good news, though, especially for all you budding coin collectors out there. As of this year, the U.S. Mint is featuring Harriet on not one, not two, but 3 commemorative coins. According to the U.S. Mint, the collection will feature gold, silver, and half-dollar coins and will showcase Harriet Tubman's pursuit of social justice, with each coin representing a different era of her extraordinary life and varied accomplishments. The silver dollar coin commemorates Harriet Tubman's pivotal role as conductor of the Underground Railroad. The half-dollar coin remembers her role as a scout and spy for the Union Army, and the $5 gold coin pays tribute to her life after the Civil War and her lifelong commitment to help those in need. That brings us to the conclusion of our second episode. In our next couple of episodes, we're going on a field trip as Sister Elaine takes Georgie, Gigi, and the rest of their 4th grade class to visit the United States Supreme Court. Rumor has it they'll get to meet a Supreme Court justice. Stay tuned. In the meantime, we welcome you to follow The Social Contract wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Check out our website at mytscpodcast.com. You can find George at georgescorey.com and the artist Cleo at theartistcleo.com. The Social Contract podcast is created by George S. Corey and Cleo. Produced by Talkbox Productions and Listen. Hosted by Tavia Gilbert. Associate producer, Tatiana St. Fard. Mix and master by Brian Barney. Additional dialogue editing by Kathleen Conti. Production coordinator, Brian Wilson. Social manager, Suzette Burton. On behalf of George, Cleo, Stephen, Maya, and me, Tavia, thank you for listening.